Fill your thirst beside the river. Wash the journey from your hands. Feel the comfort flow inside you.
Starting. Hi, and welcome to Healing Outside the Box. I'm Rosemary Lachance, and I'm a Reiki energy healer and a spiritual teacher.
And I'm Lisa Burton. I'm an occupational therapist and an educator, and the owner of the One Joy Center for Wellness in Hampton.
And we are dedicated to providing you with food for thought information and answers to all modalities of alternative healing, spiritual development, animal welfare, environmental concerns, and so much more in the form of guest speakers who are experts in their fields. We ask you to embrace the show with an open mind. We will give you our contact information at the end of the show. And if you have any show ideas, we would love to hear it, or any people that you think might make interesting guests, please contact us. And tonight I want to introduce you to our new co-host. This is Lisa Burton.
Thank you.
And she's going to be with us from now on. I think you're going to really enjoy her. Jane Power and Jimmy Driscoll are no longer with us. They have many commitments. Jane is committed to her book and Jimmy with his film, so they're not able to do this anymore. And we thank them for their help and wish them well. So please welcome Lisa, and we will go on with the show. Now, tonight is our 110th show.
Well,
110th show. Yeah, you were with us from the start.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we have with us tonight, the title of the show is The Truth About Acid Indigestion. And our guest is our famous Dr. James Sensenig, a naturopathic doctor. Okay. Dr. Sensenig has been practicing naturopathic medicine for nearly 30 years and is well known for helping thousands of people regain their health. Dr. Sensenig sees patients with complaints of all kinds and is particularly interested in the treatment of digestive diseases, headaches, and migraine, joint and muscle complaints, and chronic fatigue. He also sees children with health problems ranging from asthma and eczema to developmental delays and autism. Dr. Sensenig graduated from the National College of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland, Oregon, where he later served as Dean of Education. He was the founding president of the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, the chairman of its Government Affairs Committee for a decade, and the founding dean of the College of Naturopathic Medicine at the University of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Dr. Sensenig has consulted for a number of government agencies, insurance companies, colleges, and natural products companies. He's on the faculty of the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Tempe, Arizona, and the University of Bridgeport College of Naturopathic Medicine. Welcome.
Thank you.
So good to see you. Have you here again.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, so the title is The Truth About Acid Indigestion, and that is a very good thing to talk about, because there are so many acid blockers out there. Why do you think there is?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think it's really simple. I think people are overeating, they're overweight, they're eating the wrong thing, and they get heartburn.
Okay.
50 years ago, 100 years ago, when you had heartburn, you stopped eating, you drank a little more, you had something to neutralize the acid, you ducked into the pharmacy and you got a little bit of soda water. That's where soda all started, you may know. Soda is baking soda or bicarbonate of soda, and every apothecary or drugstore in America had a soda fountain. And the purpose of drinking the soda was to neutralize the acid.
The acid. I think my relatives used to take bitters. Does that help?
They take bitters,
Yeah?
a little bit of apple cider vinegar.
Okay.
These things all, it's interesting that you should start with that, because the bitters and apple cider vinegar stimulate acid production in the stomach, thereby solving the heartburn problem. And that sounds backwards.
Yes, you're right. You would think so, but no. The good acid.
Right.
The good acid.
So we've gotten from this point where you ducked in the pharmacy to get the soda. By the way, there was a pharmacist in Atlanta, Georgia, who started adding cola, nut, and cocaine to the soda water, and he called that Coca-Cola. And that's the famous story of the beginning of soda. Right? But that's where the word comes from, is the soda fountain.
Soda and cocaine.
Well, the soda fountain, which neutralized people's stomach acid.
Right. What if you're in a restaurant and you're having dinner and all of a sudden you get that heartburn? Could you order just soda water from the?
You could.
Yeah, just soda water
You
and
could.
drink that,
You
right?
could.
And you could get bitters because it's
Right.
usually have a bar there, so.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
But that wasn't good enough. We had to go from the neutralizing soda to something to neutralize the acid, like the old plop plop fizz fizz and the Rolaids and all the other stuff
yeah.
that simply neutralize the acid already in the stomach. And then that's not good enough. I guess you can't make enough money on that. So we got up to another generation of pharmaceuticals, which are the H2 blockers. This was a class of drugs that blocked the stomach from making the acid itself. And then that wasn't good enough, and now we're up to something called PPIs, or proton pump inhibitors. And these are drugs that block the final step of the acid manufacturer in the stomach. See, acid is made from hydrogen, and it's hydrochloric acid, right? So it's made from hydrogen and chloride, H and Cl. So you have to have the hydrogen and you have to have the chlorine atom to make the HCl. And what these drugs do, what the PPIs do, is they block the secretion of that hydrogen, the last hydrogen atom that's necessary to make the hydrochloric acid, thereby blocking the ability of the stomach to make the acid. So we're up to the second, third, maybe fourth generation of medicines that actually now interrupt, rather than just neutralize, we're interrupting or blocking the stomach's ability to make the acid.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, what was somewhat of a simple indigestion problem, kind of cared for over the counter, has now gotten very invasive with the pharmacy.
Well, yeah, and what happens is Lisa, what happens is that this has happened throughout conventional medicine. As new interventions are invented, new problems are invented. In fact, what used to be called heartburn is now called gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, because there's a drug for it, right? Or drugs, the PPIs. It used to be a simple problem, but as we become more obese and eat more junk food and I think overeat, I mean, look at what people eat in this country and look at what's going on. And, there's research on acid indigestion that shows just that. More exercise, smaller meals, losing weight, stop smoking, stop drinking soda pops and things like this in itself would cut down on the amount of heartburn, or GERD as we now call it. But there's the fallacy. The heartburn is not caused by stomach acid.
Really?
Really. And this is the research from conventional medicine. People who tend to have heartburn or acid regurgitation or GERD tend to have less stomach acid than the normal person. What's happening is they don't have enough acid to digest their food properly. See, here's something I've always wondered about. What you're told in Physiology 101 in medical school or nursing school or anywhere else where people study human physiology is that the acid in your stomach is secreted by the stomach when the food hits the stomach, which makes perfect sense. I mean, if you look at all mammals who are digesting their food this way, why would you have acid in your stomach if it's not needed? Instead, what happens is, at the time the food hits the stomach starts to secrete acid. Well, actually, that's not quite right. The research shows that about 30% of acid starts to be secreted when you look at or smell food.
Oh, right.
So there's a preparatory acid release. Then as the food gets to the stomach, another 60-70% of the acid is released. So it's there at the time that you're eating for the purpose of digesting the food. But think about it. Most people don't get digestion when they're sitting in the restaurant eating. No. They get it later, on the way home, half an hour later while watching TV, at night while they're in bed.
Getting the heartburn.
Right. If heartburn were directly related to stomach acid, you would have the burning immediately upon eating, because we're told that the acid is secreted immediately upon eating.
Right.
So why does it come later?
Right, exactly. exactly. I read someplace where it said, don't drink a lot of water before you eat because it washes the acid away.
It dilutes the acid.
Dilutes the acid.
Dilutes the acid,
That's
so
not
you
good.
can't digest as well.
Okay, good. All right, so why do you get it so much later? Go ahead, tell us.
Well, you get it later because it's not stomach acid at all that's causing the problem. The lack of stomach acid,
Right.
medically that's called hypochlorhydria, or in rare cases achlorhydria, not enough hydrochloric acid. The lack, this is an oversimplification, but the lack of acid results in the food that's in the stomach not being digested properly. So if it's not being digested properly, it's kind of sitting there for, again, oversimplification. It begins to ferment somewhat because you have bacteria in your stomach and your small intestine. That causes acid. There are fermentive acids, right?
Right.
So now you get this acid bolus of food that's sitting in the gut, and that starts to burn a little bit. So if we block the ability of the individual to make acid, it actually exacerbates the problem.
Wow.
And this is why people become dependent on these drugs, because they use them for a long period of time. They no longer can make stomach acid to digest their food. Then they try to get off of it. They have no stomach acid, right? So the problem
This is
persists. Now you have to stay with the drug.
Can that be fixed?
It can be fixed by restoring normal digestive function, which is a long-term project, especially if somebody's been on one of the PPIs or the acid blockers for a long time. The longer they've been on it, the harder it is to reverse the process. And it doesn't stop there. You know, the good Lord put acid in our stomachs for a reason. This is not a joke, and it wasn't put there to sell drugs, right?
Right.
Or make TV commercials. It's there to digest the food. But it's also there to, or maybe I should say it this way, it has an effect on the overall pH of the body. It's necessary for protein digestion. It's necessary for mineral absorption. So you start messing with the acid, you start stopping the ability of an individual to make the acid, it affects all of those things. And that's going to have long-range side effects. Among the most common side effects of the acid blockers, particularly the PPI class, is osteoporosis. Why? Because it's changing the pH in a way that is causing a mineral deficiency, specifically calcium and magnesium. Also iron to some extent. But if you can't absorb your minerals, then your body gets to take them out of your bones, of course, and that's what osteoporosis is all about.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I have to tell you the story. A couple of years ago, I was at a small workshop, and I showed up early, and we were waiting for the group, whatever you want to call it, the person who was doing the workshop to show up. And as I walked up, somebody said, "You must be the naturopathic doctor." That's because I was the only guy there. I think that's how they knew. And there was and I said yes, and there was a young woman in this group who said, "Can I ask you a question?" I go, "Sure." She said, Can you do anything for osteoporosis?" And I said, "Well, of course. But who are we talking about? Your mother? Your grandmother?" She said, "No, me." I said, "You? You're not a day over 27. She said, "Well, I'm 28. And you have osteoporosis?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Let me guess. You've been on a protein pump inhibitor for," I actually named the drug, but I said, "You've been on such and such a drug for 10 years, right?" She said, "Yeah, how did you know?" It's the most common, or one of the most common side effects. But you see, this is one of the things I like about my world as a naturopathic doctor and the world of understanding the way nature works. See, I'm going to back up. I'm going to be a little politically incorrect, but I'm going to say it anyway. Okay. You know, the dominant school of medicine likes to talk about naturopathic medicine as being unscientific, and somehow we're convinced that conventional medicine is scientific. Well, here's a perfect example. The acid that is in the stomach of mammals is there for a purpose, and when that purpose is disrupted or disturbed, it has to have far-reaching effects. That's how things work, right? So you shut down the acid, you change the pH of the entire organism, You've changed the ability to digest proteins, as I said. You've changed the ability to absorb minerals, or some minerals. And so each of those, in turn, has side effects as well. When you can't digest proteins properly, you increase the likelihood of developing allergens, because breaking down proteins is one way your body deals with potential food allergens. So the research shows that people who use PPIs have increased food allergies. They have increased mineral deficiencies. Then mineral deficiencies like calcium, magnesium lead to osteoporosis or cardiac arrhythmias, right? And then the list just goes on and on and on. When you have mineral deficiencies, those minerals are cofactors in everything in your body, from nerve conduction to muscle contraction to digestion itself. And so you start getting this whole list of potential side effects because the PPI is disrupting the acid production at such a fundamental level. You can't get much lower than that.
Is that why they put calcium in Tums now? They tried to?
I think they tried to for that, yeah.
Right. I just, bing, yeah.
So the problem is not the acid at all. The problem is the stomach's ability to protect itself from the acid.
Mm-hmm.
So
are there other conditions that might seem similar to a person and they think it might be heartburn, but there's really something more with the symptoms?
Well, there's all different degrees of potential inflammation in the stomach, the esophagus, small intestine, so-called inflammatory bowel disease and esophagitis and so on. But very few of these have to do directly with the acid. Not that acid's not involved, but that's not the primary cause. I mean, think about this. The other thing, this is why I say I've said this before on this show, there's no critical thinking in medicine at all. Any student of physiology knows that when we're under stress, the nervous system inhibits the digestive system.
Yeah.
Okay? You have two nervous systems that are thought of generally as the voluntary nervous system. That's me sitting here talking and moving my hands, right? Then you have the autonomic nervous system, which is the part you don't think about. This is the part of your nervous system that takes care of breathing and heart rate and blood flow. And within the autonomic system, you have two subdivisions, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Now, what does that mean in English? Well, the parasympathetic is sort of the vegetative function. You don't have to think about digestion. You don't have to think about breathing. You don't have to think about your heart rate. That's the parasympathetic side of the equation. The other part of the automatic or autonomic nervous system is the sympathetic, or fight or flight, or stress. Now, what happens there is when an animal, or a mammal especially, is under stress, then all these survival mechanisms kick in. Blood pressure goes up, blood sugar goes up, visual acuity goes up, strength goes up. This is that reaction that allows somebody to lift a school bus off of somebody who's injured, kind of thing. This is like fight or flight. It's a survival mechanism.
Right.
And anybody who paid attention in physiology class knows that when the stress reaction kicks in, the body is not only ignoring the vegetative side in terms of the digestion, but it's also inhibiting it. It's actually turning it off. It's almost like the good Lord decided that when you're running for your life, which is what the stress reaction amounts to in the animal world, at the time when you're running for your life, when you're under stress like that, it's not a great time to waste time digesting your food or going to the bathroom, right?
Right.
So that's shut down. So now think about this for a minute. We know in our culture, and it's part of our, it's almost to the point of being a joke, that people get heartburn and indigestion from stress, right? The type A personality kind of idea. You know, people who are stressed out are the ones who get the heartburn and so on. So how can it be an overly acidic condition? Because the stress reaction, or the stressful or stressed out person, doesn't have too much acid, they have too little acid.
Right. Could that be something that people, have? It's a genetic thing too. Does it do it that way, or is it only because of the taking too many acid blockers?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Can you get having too little acid in your body, can that come also from genetic, like?
Well, probably, because, in 7.5 billion people on the planet, we've got all kinds, and so it's certainly possible, but I don't think it's a common.
No, it's not
it's
common.
not a common
No,
thing at all.
once in a while.
There are
So
people
it's
who
more
have
lifestyle,
right,
you think?
right,
Yeah,
right.
that's right. The more lifestyle.
So you
right.
can easily predict, if you understand basic physiology, you could easily predict what the side effects are going to be. B12, iron deficiency, magnesium deficiency, calcium deficiency, overgrowth of bacteria in the stomach, overgrowth or susceptibility to infectious problems, especially pneumonia, increased C. diff in the stool, food allergies. I mean, it's just, these are the things that are shown in research to be related to these drugs. Now, the other side of this would be, well, isn't that better maybe than suffering from heartburn and staying awake and tossing all night from the heartburn? Well, how about just correcting the problem rather than treating the symptom? And that's the other side of it then, obviously.
About the proper eating and so forth, and what.
Well, and not only that, you probably never asked yourself this question, but how come you can eat a cow, steak, a burger, and you can digest the burger, but you don't digest yourself? I mean, what's going on there? The acid in your stomach is strong enough to activate enzymes. I should say it this way. The acid activates enzymes that are strong enough to completely disassemble the cow.
Wow.
I mean, let's get even more graphic. You got a lion eating a zebra, right? It's eating almost every part of that zebra, right? It's not flaying out the steak. It's eating the whole zebra. And it can digest the zebra and not digest itself. How's that?
Wow, that's a good point. Yeah.
And the reason that that's possible is that the contents of your stomach never touch your stomach. There's a thick mucus shield that lines the inside of the stomach that has a really complicated name. It's called the mucus shield.
I think I can
Funny.
remember that one.
So the mucus shield lines the inside of the stomach. So this acid mix with the digestive juices and the enzymes and the acid that is being digested never touches the inside of your stomach. Because if it did, it would digest your stomach. It would burn a hole through it.
Right.
When that happens, that's called an ulcer
Right.
or indigestion. The problem is not the acid. The acid normally would not eat a hole through the shield unless the shield is down. Sounds a little like Star Trek, right?
Right.
When the shields are down, then the lining of the stomach is vulnerable to the acid. Why would the shield be down?
Right.
Because the digestive function is being inhibited by the stress. Because when you inhibit digestive function, you're not only decreasing acid. See, the savvy listener is saying, well, if you're turning down the acid, how would you get heartburn? Well, you're also turning down the mucus shield. So now what little bit of acid is there becomes problematic and can erode the stomach lining and erode the base of, or the bottom end of the esophagus. That's esophagitis. And that kind of constant irritation is actually a precancerous condition. But the solution is not in turning off the acid, it's in normalizing the digestion.
So how can you empower our listeners to listen to their body and to ask the right questions when they're having these symptoms?
Well, I'm not sure how to address that. I think that many people have acid indigestion at a time when they're aware of the factors that are involved in that. And, often, well, one of the things, actually, Lisa, maybe think about it this way. One of the things that happens in conventional medicine, for almost everything, is that the medications are used to treat the symptom. And what you see among some people is, if I can just make the symptom go away, I can continue the behavior that allowed me to do that in the first place. And that's what the ads push for these kinds of drugs. If you just take the purple pill, right, you can still have all the
Right.
spaghetti you want,
yes,
or whatever.
eat anything you want. You don't
Right?
learn anything. You just keep on
And
doing.
you don't
right?
have to change. You realize that you're having the problem when you have that third hamburger and the third serving
Oh,
of
God.
fries.
Oh.
So the solution that is being sold to you in this country is not cut back on the burgers, but take
Take a
Exactly.
the drug so you can have more, so you can enjoy mom's cooking, or, you know, have fun at the barbecue, or whatever it is.
That's right. Eat whatever you want, take the pills. That's what we're all about anyway. And
So
then just take a
just
pill.
just today I saw, just, you know, a couple of hours ago, I saw a new patient who's a 63-year-old woman whose main complaint is chronic sinus infections, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So now you connect the dots as a naturopathic physician. Now, this is not something that would be obvious because you don't have all this information, but just to bring it back to make it relevant here, part of my assessment is she's having chronic sinus problems because she probably has some underlying food allergy or food sensitivity. She may have chronic infections because her immune system is not competent enough to fight off whatever the infecting agent is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That often happens when people are zinc deficient. She also has leg cramps, which is a classical magnesium deficiency symptom, although not always, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I find out she also has osteopenia, the first stage of osteoporosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then finally in her history, I find out that she's been on an acid blocker for about 15 years.
Wow.
So that's the low common denominator. It's possible, notice I say possible, it's possible that the acid blocker is at the root of the whole problem because it's disturbed her physiology, it's changed her absorption of minerals, and it's prevented her from fully digesting her food. So in the conventional system, if she goes to somebody with a chronic sinus infection, what do? You get antibiotics,
Right.
right?
Treat the symptoms.
So you're not fixing the problem. So one of the things that we have to do is restore normal digestive function. The problem is not too little acid or too much acid, it's too little acid. So the solution is going to sound backwards and stupid and upside down, but if you're following what I'm saying,
Right.
the solution to heartburn and acid indigestion and GERD is more acid if the mucus shield is functioning properly. The last thing you want to do is take or give somebody acid if the stomach lining is already inflamed or irritated or vulnerable. So we have to start there. There's also something else I think I should mention about. There are some people who speculate that one of the problems with more indigestion these days is the fact that the conventional profession has been telling people to watch out for salt for the last
Right.
couple of decades.
Yes, they have.
Now remember, hydrochloric acid is hydrogen and chlorine, or chloride, right? Where do you get chlorine in your food? Sodium chloride. So good old salt is one of the major sources of the ions that you need to make stomach acid. So if you don't have enough salt in your diet, you can't make hydrochloric acid.
So why
or
are
sufficient.
why are they telling them not to eat salt? Blood pressure.
They tell you that it has to do with your blood pressure.
I read it didn't. I read that was a fallacy.
It never has. And
No.
there's no good research that shows that that's the case. Maybe for a small percentage of people, but that's one of the myths in medicine that gets perpetuated. Everybody knows, everybody knows, everybody knows, but there's no research on it. Which is another thing, and you and I have talked about the politics of this before.
Oh yeah.
There's this myth in this country that somehow conventional medicine is scientifically based and evidence-based, and that everybody else is not. And yet, here are several examples right here tonight of research that does not support or actually contradicts what's actually happening, and it has no traction in medicine at all. And just like this acid thing, the research that's been reported in conventional medicine we're talking about, in the journals in conventional medicine, shows that people with acid indigestion have too little acid. And yet the gastroenterology community in the United States and the public still think that it's something else. So in spite of research to the contrary, it still doesn't find its way into, quote, scientific medicine. So is it really scientific?
You know, when they say scientific, I'm afraid they say it because first of all, they test on animals. Okay, that's a horrible thing in and of itself, and I'm totally against that. But the animal is not, our bodies are not like the animal's body. So that's a whole different, right? A whole different thing. And then second of all, I was reading where they do these, when they do these experiments and studies, they tell the people, when you get just something that we could use to talk about, to sell this drug, stop the research right there. I've read that so many times. Don't go any further to get more information, make sure, stop it right there. That's from Big Pharma, and that's not right.
I'm sure you could do a whole show or shows. You could do a whole year of shows on what's happening in, quote, science. It's just like that. There have been many, many books written about so-called science, about journal articles, about just what you said. We set out to prove something. If it doesn't work out the way we want, then we're not going to publish it. And on and on and on and on and on and on. There are people who have been editors of prestigious medical journals who have, in the last few years, resigned in disgust. I mean, the corruption in medical science is, well, it's hard to even put words to it. And if it was going on in any other, any other area, people would be screaming about it. But somehow in Big Pharma and in medicine, we just turn our back.
And they want to trust. First of all, they want to trust the doctors, and the doctors, in all fairness, they trust the pharmaceutical companies. They trust the drug people. Okay, and then they don't. I lost my train of thought. They don't. People can find out this information if they just get on the web, right, and start digging.
Right.
It is there.
Right. But that it's hard for me to be politically correct. So I'm not going to try. You say that the doctors want to trust the pharmaceutical industry with all evidence to the contrary. And so why do they keep on trusting? We're all aware of the Vioxx scandal a few years ago where the FDA turned its back on over 100,000 people died from Vioxx and nothing was done. And then when a whistleblower, David Graham, who was at the Office of Adverse Effects at the FDA, finally went to the New York Times because the FDA wouldn't do anything, then he lost his job.
Oh, sure.
Okay? Now, why can't the medical profession extrapolate from that? If it was happening from Vioxx or with Vioxx, you mean that's the only example of a regulatory agency turning its back on something with adverse effects? I mean, come on.
No.
Right? And so they're taught to do that in medical school. They're told that, there's regulatory agencies in place that are looking out for our health and so on. But the evidence doesn't support that. And they want to tell you that they're evidence-based. What about that evidence? Or if you just want to be a little more kind about the whole thing, what about this evidence? We consume half the drugs that are manufactured in the world, in the United States. We're the 92nd healthiest nation.
92nd. Nice, huh?
We have more doctors per capita than any other nation. We spend more money than anybody else on health care. How about that for evidence? More money, more doctors, more drugs, 92nd healthiest nation. That's evidence.
Wow.
Right?
That's scary to hear that.
Yeah.
It's just this latest scare they had now, the cortisone that they put in. Steroids they put into people to help them with the back and all those problems. Contaminated, meningized. Now, how does that happen? You know what I'm saying? How did that happen?
Don't know. Well, they'll blame it on a rogue pharmacy.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
I know. I've been reading a lot about the FDA not really getting involved in anything, not really helping lately, and it's sad.
They'll protect you from, if you want to drink unpasteurized milk, they'll protect you from that.
Yeah, right?
Right.
Unbelievable.
Right.
They even broke into that man's place and took everything. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. The more natural, the more wonderful, the more they go against it.
So if you go back to this acid thing for a second, the problem is exactly the opposite. I had a professor when I was in naturopathic medical school who said, if you want to live long and prosper, listen carefully to what you're being advised to do by the conventional system, and then think about doing the opposite. And here's a case where that really applies.
Okay.
Because what one needs to solve the indigestion long term now is to get the acid or the digestion back to normal. So what does that mean? Well, that means first of all, being relaxed enough or at peace enough or settled enough when eating so that your digestive system can work right.
Yeah, that's so
This
true.
is
Not
why
eating in the car while you're racing.
exactly.
Right. Racing
And this
around,
is why
right,
in
yeah.
many cultures eating is a big deal. You sit down, now it's changing worldwide, I'm sure. But traditionally people sat down and enjoyed a good meal together with family, with wine, with laughter, and one course after another over hours, right? Because your digestive system cannot work when you're eating on the run or when you're stressed. That'd be a good starting point. You have to have enough minerals, namely sodium chloride, to make your hydrogen chloride or your hydrochloric acid in the first place. So one has to have those minerals. One has to salt one's food or have the right salts. Now, we're talking mostly sea salt,
Sea salt,
right?
yeah.
Or things that have more minerals than just sodium chloride in them. Those minerals, you know, there's 109 elements on the periodic table. They're all necessary for life, every one of them. So we have to have those minerals.
Can I just ask, why is it that you would suggest the sea salt in particular?
Well, sea salts or some of the salts that are harvested, like the Himalayan salts and things that have been around on the planet for a while that are not just sodium chloride,
Okay.
but have all the other minerals in there, or some good source of minerals. There's other kinds of mineral products around that range from liquid minerals that are extracted from seawater to minerals that are made from the Great Salt Lake, or some that are made from older plants that have minerals when their root systems went deeper than they do in agricultural crops. See, the USDA does analyses of food and the content of food. So when you look at a food, when you look at something that says, you know, this food has this much calcium and this much magnesium and this much in the way of calories or vitamin A or something, that's not, you know, that's not Wendy's or Red Book who's doing that. They're looking at the official food tables from the United States Department of Agriculture. And the USDA revises those tables every once in a while, about every 20, 25 years. Every time they update the tables, the mineral content in the food in question goes down. And not a little bit. You're talking about 40, 50% each 25 years. Wow. So today's broccoli doesn't have the same nutritional value as far as minerals goes that it did just 20 years ago, or for that matter, 40 or 50 or 60 or 100 years ago. So we're not getting these minerals in the soil. So we need minerals for healthy production of acid as well. And then many people need help with their digestion through digestive enzymes, and believe it or not, sometimes hydrochloric acid itself. And the simple, easiest, and safest way to increase the acid production is what you mentioned at the top of the show, so-called bitter herbs. Right. There's many different kinds. There are some that are used today in alcoholic beverages. You mentioned
Bitters,
you get the bitters from the bar. You can get bitters also in any health food store, or for that matter in a commercial grocery store. Bitters that range from hops to whatever stimulate the stomach to make the acid. This is the origin of beer and wine, for example. Somehow people figured out that both the alcohol and the herbal content in those things relax the stomach enough to increase acid production. I don't think they understood it in that way, but they knew that having some alcoholic beverage, whether it was mead or whether it was, you know, beer or wine or whatever, before the meal actually increased the ability to digest properly or better. So stimulating acid with vinegar or with the bitters is a way to increase the acid too. But if somebody has a long history now of acid indigestion or GERD and they're on these medications, it's relatively difficult to do that by yourself because it takes a while to turn that around.
I would imagine.
And then the other thing, so relaxing, stimulating acid production by relaxing or by using stomach bitters and so on. These things are things you would do before you would wean off of anything if you were going to do that. But you also have to make sure that the stomach is protecting itself or coating itself. You have to make sure that mucus shield is up. Anybody who would put acid in a stomach without a mucus shield is going to suffer the consequences, right? I mean, you're going to have a problem there. So.
And how would that be detected? What would symptoms
Well,
be
it's
that-
really hard to measure that, but the things that help there classically, again, are relaxation, meditation, anything that increases the parasympathetic or the vegetative or the relaxing side, acupuncture, meditation, good music,
Yeah.
the beer, the
Soft
wine.
music, the wine.
And we know that certain botanical extracts, particularly licorice root, has the ability to stimulate that mucus shield. Now, licorice root can be a problem for some people because if they're sensitive to it, it can raise their blood pressure.
Right.
So what they do is take the alkaloid responsible for the blood pressure out of the licorice. So when it's used for the purpose of stomach lining stimulation, it's known as deglycerized glycyrrhiza. Glycyrrhiza is the Latin name for the plant, and the glycyrrhiza is the glycerin is the alkaloid. So you have deglycerized glycyrrhiza, or DGL. But there are other plants that are known as demulcents. These are things like slippery elm, for example, okra,
Right.
cabbage, that also will soothe the lining
Yeah,
of the
like
stomach.
a
They kind of protect the stomach.
sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut. They
Yeah.
kind of protect the, oh, and that's the other thing I completely forgot about. I'm glad you brought that up. Sauerkraut has the good bacteria in it,
Right.
real sauerkraut.
Right.
Most commercial brands don't anymore, but sauerkraut was a cultured food, which is replacing the good bacteria. And the good bacteria, the presence of the good bacteria in the digestive system, also help to mitigate some of these things that we're talking about. And with today's antibiotics and steroids and the acid blockers, when you change the acid environment in the stomach, you change the microorganisms as well. See, the microorganisms in the gut are to the gut what, say, algae is to a fish tank. What you grow in that fish tank depends on what the pH of the water is. So if it becomes too alkaline, you're going to grow things that normally wouldn't be there. And so we find, I was just reading some articles about this subject over the last couple of days, where one of the risks of PPIs is increase in pneumonia. And what they think is happening is there's less control of there's less killing off of pathogenic bacteria because the patient doesn't have enough acid to do that.
Wow. So it's all related.
So if you don't have enough acid in your gut, you're going to be able to grow more pathogenic bacteria and less of the good guys, right?
I like to drink ginger tea after in the evening, and I notice it has in it licorice root, and also has in it black pepper. Why do you think they put that in there? Black pepper. I've noticed that cropping up in this and that and the natural things.
I'm not sure. What are they calling the tea? Is it a digestive aid?
Ginger tea, yeah, digestive aid.
Well, ginger has those digestive properties by itself.
Right.
So what else did you say they're adding? Licorice root?
Licorice root, the black pepper, and there was one other thing that is
Well, they're adding the licorice root possibly because of its effect on the mucus shield.
mucus shield, right.
And
The black pepper,
black
those are
pepper,
surprising.
black pepper has, and I cannot think of the name of the alkaloid off the top of my head, that stimulates circulation.
Right, right.
So maybe that's the point there.
Okay.
I can't imagine there's very much in it. It would make it pretty.
No, it's the
pretty
last
spicy.
ingredient.
Yeah.
It's the last
I bet
ingredient.
it's there. I bet it's there to improve circulation, which would relax the stomach and allow more acid to be potentially secreted.
They say that we eat too much sweet and salty and not enough sour and bitter, right? So that's another way they can. What about acidophilus? Taking acidophilus.
Well, I think most people need probiotics on a pretty regular basis. With all the antibiotics that we are fed in this country,
In the animals
in the
that
animals,
we
the
eat, that
stuff that
people
we're
eat.
eating, and also the stuff. I mean, look, we use the antibiotics
Antibiotics,
for
yeah.
everything, and in the hands of a good holistic doctor, a naturopathic doctor, these kinds of things are not guessed at; they're measured. You can do all kinds of testing for the bacteria in the stomach, in the small intestine, and you're not just concerned about pathogenic bacteria or parasites, as is often the case in conventional medicine, but we're also concerned about whether or not somebody has the good bacteria. And you find that very, very few people, I'd say less than half, well now this is a skewed population because these are people who are coming in a doctor's office because they have a problem. But out of that population, probably less than or fewer than half the people have the normal intestinal bacteria. And oddly enough, or sadly enough, I suppose, there are a lot of people who are taking probiotics or good bacteria on their own, and it's not making any difference because it's not the right one for them,
Right.
or it's not
You need to
strong
find
enough.
out, yeah.
But if you go back to, you know, I attended a lecture shortly after I got out of medical school, where there was an elderly, well, I don't know by my standards today because I'm a little older, but at the time she seemed like she was an elderly pediatrician. And I'll never forget, she said that, you know, it takes 2 or 3 pediatricians to equal one grandmother. I never forgot that. And
That's
in
cute.
that people who've been around the planet for a while and have some real world experience have learned things that conventional medicine still hasn't figured out. And here's one with the probiotics and the good bacteria. The dominant school of medicine has only discovered that there are good bacteria within the last couple of decades. You know, this whole thing about, you know, eat your probiotics after this or that. And all of the indigenous societies on the planet have some kind of cultured food that's a staple for them. You know, whether it's sauerkraut, like you mentioned, or yogurt,
Yogurt,
right?
yeah. The good yogurt.
Or fish sauce, or shrimp paste, or kimchi, or the list, sourdough. It just goes on and on and on and on. Everybody's somehow figured out that you have to have the good bacteria for normal digestive function. And again, that becomes a staple. Except in our mongrelized, you know, United States, where we come from all these cultures, we don't really have any staples. Yogurt's become popular in the last few years, but frankly, most commercial yogurts don't have enough decent, you know, they don't have a high enough count of
they don't.
bacteria to make a significant difference.
That's true. Not these things, low play and all this and the no, that doesn't.
I think the manufacturers just sprinkle enough in there so that they can call it
they
yogurt.
can call it just that. You know, I read somewhere also and wanted to see what you thought about it. One thing that might help people to digest is the way we eat, the way we put the food into our stomach, to put in the, if you're going to have fruit, which I don't think fruit mixes good with greens, but put the fruit in first. But let's just not do the fruit. I think fruit should be in between meals. That's my personal. But anyway, put the salad in first, and then put the vegetables, the potatoes and the vegetables, and then if you're going to eat meat, put that in last, or whatever your protein is, put that in last, because it sits on the stomach, and if you put in the fruit last or the salad last, they're easier to digest, and they sit on top of the protein and get decay in your stomach, what you call, remember? Is that true?
Right,
What do you think
fermentation.
about fermentation?
Well, I'm not sure about that. However, conventional wisdom, well, I shouldn't say not today's conventional wisdom, but historically people have agreed with that, and it makes good physiological sense because we really didn't talk about digestion in detail. What happens is when the food reaches your stomach, the stomach secretes acid. The acid, among other things, activates the protein digesting enzyme which is in the stomach. And the acid and the pepsin get churned around with the stomach contents for the purpose, you might say, of digesting proteins. Okay? Now, when that process is completed, that hunk called a bolus of food, that bolus is moved into the small intestine, into the duodenum. And when it moves into the duodenum, the degree of acidity, the more acid that is, the more vigorously it stimulates the pancreas to release its hormones. But when the pancreas lets go, it not only lets go its hormones, but also sodium bicarb, which now neutralizes, turns off, shuts down protein digestion, because in the duodenum you're mostly digesting carbohydrates. So if you're digesting, so proteins and carbohydrates are digested under completely different pH conditions. The protein requires the acid and the carbohydrates require the alkaline medium, and the body's designed to do that. And so people have said in the past, and even there have been some popular books on this subject, if you eat a meal that's got roughly equal amounts of protein and carbs, you've got a problem because it cancels each other out. I don't know if it cancels it out, but it certainly makes it more difficult. And when you think about what's happening in the, quote, natural world, there are very few other animals besides humans that sit down to a meal of meat and potatoes.
Right. Yeah.
Or have bread and butter with their burger.
Right.
You know, or fries with their burger, I should say, or, you know, bread and butter with their spaghetti and meatballs.
Yes, exactly.
Okay?
Yep.
Most
Starch.
Most things as they're found in nature are mostly protein with some carbs, or to some degree, mostly carbs with little protein. For example, think about eating a tuber, some kind of roots, a potato or a sweet potato or something. That's mostly carbohydrate. But the animal that's eating a sweet potato or a turnip or a coconut or fruit is not also polishing it off with a protein snack, right? Nor is the animal that's eating an animal
Oh, let me stop.
having bread and butter
Yeah.
or pasta with it. You know?
Right.
It's mostly protein with a little bit of those other, with the carb and the fat in there, or vice versa.
Protein and vegetables that's kind of light. Yeah, that's the way you know, and I wanted to interject here 1 minute. When we talked about salt for people, some people go, hey, honey, see, I can have my salty food. We're not talking about like fast food, which is like loaded with salt. I mean, that's way up and above. We're talking about what you add into the food, right?
Right.
And that it's good sea salt with the good minerals. And I just want to clear that up for our audience.
Right,
Yeah.
we're talking about
Right.
products that are the good minerals.
Exactly.
And there's an interesting thing right there. You just said snack food and fast foods are full of salt.
Ugh.
Why do you think that's the case?
Because it tastes good. Salt and fat.
Because Americans are craving minerals because they're mineral
Yeah.
deficient.
There you go. That's
why
good. Good
people
point.
need salt. When you have enough minerals on board, you don't crave salt.
Don't crave it. Yeah.
And you don't crave sweets, and you don't crave sugar, and you don't crave sodas, and you don't crave cookies, and you're fully satiated by minerals. It's not glucose. We have this false idea that we're fully satiated or not by the sugar in our diet. That's only part of it. The thing that also satiates people is minerals. I've seen many people over the years who, as their mineral levels come back to normal, their appetite evens out, they lose weight, their blood sugar evens out, but more importantly, with respect to what we're talking about here, they no longer crave anything.
Right.
They don't crave the soda. In fact, they get to the point where someone whose minerals are properly, optimized, will find that things like soda, coffee, sweets like most junk food, salty things, they don't taste right. It's like you can't, it's too much. You know, you eat that and you want to spit it out because it's too sweet, or it's too salty, or it's too yucky in some way. And that's a mineral problem.
It's true.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, we got about 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, get down to the bit. You want to ask a question? Because I want to ask him too.
No, I just was going to comment that what I like about all the information I've received tonight is you've really connected the dots for me.
Well, everything's connected to everything.
Yeah, it all.
See, this is one of the, and Rosemary and I have had this conversation before. One of the things that happens in conventional medicine is everything's disconnected, right? You know, the gastroenterologist has no idea that what's happening in your gut is affecting your bones, right? And on and on and on and on and on. Just like the example I used. You come in with GERD, and I'm a gastroenterologist, and I'm going to put you on a PPI.
Yeah.
The fact that you end up with osteoporosis in 10 years, that's not my problem. You go see the bone doctor for that.
Exactly.
And so on. The idea that this is a very, sometimes when I'm teaching I say, oh, they're so 18th century. they still are looking at the body in this very mechanistic way where nothing connects to anything. You know, you stub your toe, you have to go see the fifth toe on the right foot doctor, right? You don't go to see the orthopedist, you go to see the...
That's so true. That's so great. I love that. I love that.
And now, and there's more and more specialists in smaller and smaller parts of the body. You know my associate who just told me the other day that somebody came into our office looking for help with high cholesterol and told her that, well, he was told something completely different by the doctor that he consulted. And she said, well, that would be your cardiologist? And he said, no, you know, the cholesterol guy. Says, well, that would be the cardiologist, right? And the patient said, no, it's not the cardiologist, it's the, oh my, what do you call those guys? She goes, it's not a cardiologist? He goes, no, it's the, the lipidologist.
Oh my goodness.
I never heard of that.
Now we have a specialist in
Wow.
lipids, right?
Oh my God.
And by the way, the advice given by the so-called lipidologist was don't eat fats, and that'll bring your cholesterol down.
Oh, okay. And you paid him how much for that?
Oh, yeah. Well, the insurance company probably paid for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Right? And that's probably the standard of care. So,
I wanted to ask, say something before we, run out of time. Minerals. I've been looking for a good mineral formula, and I don't think it's out there as far as in the health food stores. A really good one.
I think they're really hard to find because
Yeah.
because here's the problem. When you're looking for a mineral formula, most of the commercial mineral formulas contain whatever somebody put in there.
A lot of calcium, a lot of magnesium. That's the most. The other
Right.
things, there's not hardly at all.
Right. And you need all of these minerals.
Right.
All of them, with the possible exception, this is going to be hard for people to hear, with the possible exception of mercury. All known minerals are necessary for life.
Right.
Now, see, people say, well, they're toxic. What about arsenic? What about cadmium? What about lead? Well, they're actually necessary for life at very, very, very small
Very, very
doses. We're
small,
talking
yeah.
about parts per gazillion or something.
Right.
I mean, come on, go figure. They're in the soil. You think the good Lord would put you on a planet where the soil's toxic? I mean, if that's the case, we wouldn't be talking to each other.
We have to close up, but that's the problem, right? We need to talk to you. We have to come back like hundreds of times. The soil doesn't have it anymore.
Exactly.
Doesn't have it anymore. And don't kid yourself, people. It doesn't have it. You have to take it by mouth. We got to say goodnight. I don't want to. There's so many more things. Oh, well, more shows, right? I wanted to
guess.
tell you something I read. If we have time at the end, I will, that I could not believe today about what the doctor prescribed for the kids. All right, we're going to give you the contact information for Dr. Sensenig. The contact information for Dr. Sensenig is, he is with at Natural Health Associates in Hampton, Connecticut. The website is www.naturalhealth.com, and his phone number is 203-230-2200.
To learn more information about this show or any of our past shows, please contact us at healoutside-the-box@yahoo.com, or to reach Rosemary Lachance, you can reach her at 203-627-7966 or www.rosemarylachance.com. To reach myself, you can try my phone at 203-804-0024 or visit my website at www.theonejoy.com. We are also on Facebook under Healing Outside the Box.
Okay, this is when I usually read my quote, and it's a good quote, but I'm going to save it because I wanted to bring this one thing up. I read today on the internet that doctors are giving children that what you call the attention deficit disorder, the medicine they have, for students who just don't want to study, that have a low IQ. They're giving this drug to them. I was like, I can't believe this. I totally cannot believe that they would do something like that.
That's the culture we're in. There's a drug for everything.
My God, I guess we have to say goodnight now. So, thank you
There
very
should
much.
be a drug for that.
Yeah.
Right? The end of the show. Isn't
Right.
that right?
Next
Thank you
time,
so
more.
much.
Until next time, Dr. Sensenig, and he will be back, folks.
Very informative.
Good night.
Fill your thirst beside the river. Wash the journey from your hands. Feel the comfort flow inside.